Welcome to the Middle America Screencast. This is a fascinating realm that includes diverse cultures and landscapes. The rich indigenous history of this realm has left a lasting imprint, as have the Spanish and other powers from Europe that colonized the region. Here we see indigenous coffee farmer in the mountains of Honduras on the left and a Spanish Catholic church on the right. Here we have some guiding questions to guide our investigation of this realm. The map of the realm shows the geographic extent from the U.S.-Mexico border on through to the south, where the Isthmus of Panama meets South America. In addition, we have the entire extent of the islands that comprise the Caribbean Sea. These are therefore distinct regions, 4 in total. The country of Mexico comprises one region that includes over half of the population of the entire realm. Central America and the Greater and Lesser Antilles Islands, defined by their relative size of the islands, are the other 3 regions. Here we see some of the major geographic qualities, including the fragmented nature of this realm. You see a history of conflict, corruption, and intervention, including that of the United States. A dependence on primary sector economies and persistent poverty. This is a volcanically active region, especially on the mainland. Indeed, the Isthmus of Panama was constructed through volcanic activity. Prior to that, the 2 continents were not connected, and this led to an interaction between the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. When the isthmus was constructed, this facilitated what has become known as the Great American Biotic Interchange, which allowed species from North America to travel southward into South America, and in many cases leading to the extinction of species in South America. As you can see, there were more predators in the north. This also interrupted the ocean flow between the Atlantic and the Pacific and led to changing climates around the world, including Europe and Africa, as the ocean currents controlled those climates. This is a very tectonically active region. You can see that Central America lies along the plate boundary between the Caribbean and Cocos plates, and extending northward into the North American plate, and this is going to be one of the defining characteristics of this realm. The process of subduction, which we saw in our discussion of the Cascade volcanoes of North America, is again at work in Central America. Indeed, this is the fundamental process that constructed the Central American land bridge, also known as the Isthmus of Panama. A look at earthquakes and volcanoes shows us that the Central American land bridge extending up into Mexico is comprised of numerous volcanoes and is tectonically active with lots of earthquakes. We saw a major earthquake in Mexico City about 4 months ago, and about 10 years ago we saw the island country of Haiti, devastated by a large earthquake. Okay, so again, some of the defining characteristics of physical geography of this realm. Note the term archipelago is used to describe a chain of islands. And in addition to earthquakes and volcanoes, we see hurricane activity. Because this is a very mountainous region, we will see elevation playing a role in controlling climate and natural vegetation, which in turn controls the type of agricultural products that are grown. This is described by the term altitudinal zonation. Note the tropical crops that are grown at low elevations in the very warm, low elevation tropics, transitioning into crops that will, in some cases, be found in the more temperate latitudes. As mentioned, this is a region that is prone to hurricane activity, so those same hurricanes that track across the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea and oftentimes hit the Gulf Coast of North America will in many cases extend across Central America, Mexico, and of course impact the Caribbean, as we saw this last year with Puerto Rico. The region of Mesoamerica or Middle America is the home of several ancient culture hearths. And you see a definition of what constitutes a culture hearth. And we have two represented, those of the Aztecs and the Mayans. These show great art and architecture. Indeed, these Mayan pyramids were not uncovered until partway through the 20th century. They had become swallowed by the tropical forests of the region before being excavated, and is now a major tourist destination, but also reflects this very advanced culture by world standards that was in place prior to European contact. As mentioned earlier, Amerindian culture continues to thrive today, especially in southern Mexico and Guatemala. One of the lasting legacies of Mesoamerican cultures is the foods that were cultivated, which transformed world diets. You can see here the three sisters defined as maize, better known here as corn, squash, and beans, but other products from cacao or cocoa to peppers and tomatoes were also important. The Spanish legacy, of course, includes language and religion. The term mestizo refers to mixed race, of which much of the population of this realm will constitute. I mentioned the extent of and the influence areas of Mesoamerica. If we look at southern Mexico as an example, this is a region that is among the poorest in Mexico and has seen unrest in recent years surrounding an effort to try to improve their place in the economy of Mexico. The mainland-rimland distinction is a way to distinguish between two distinct areas of this great realm. The mainland has a Euro-Amerindian influence, whereas the Rimland has a influence that includes a predominant black population and largely colonialized areas that were developed for agricultural export. This table will illustrate the distinction between these two, with the most important quality being the cultural influence. Again, the mainland having more of an indigenous and European influence, the Caribbean having more of an African influence, largely because of the import of slaves for plantation agriculture, which were for export. The haciendas were much less efficient and less oriented around export. Again, just to contrast these two predominant agricultural systems. While we associate Spain as being the predominant influence in the mainland, if we look at the Caribbean, we see numerous European colonial powers that controlled and colonized much of this region, some of which is still under European colonial control to this day. An important consequence of colonization was that of land alienation, which was effectively native peoples being removed from the land, in many cases being forcibly employed as laborers working on plantations, which had tremendous cultural disruption and a loss of agricultural diversity and other elements of the indigenous cultures. We see a dependence on the agricultural sector, and this is reflected by the numbers that are shown here. For example, in Honduras, we see 25% of the gross domestic product, but over 60% of the population working in agriculture. That's extremely high, considering that California, as an agricultural state, has about 3% of its population working in agriculture, largely because of the high degree of mechanization that is part of our agricultural economy. Of course, tourism, very important as well. Some of the highly desired tourism destinations. Shasta College's study abroad program went to Honduras a few years back. We are going to be back in this realm, or at least close to this realm, in Guyana, which is technically part of the South America realm, but is certainly influenced by the Caribbean. And this is a program that is designed around science, education, and conservation, but also brings in elements of culture. And it was an opportunity for us to see just the nature of these regions, these underdeveloped regions, where we have peasants in the upper left-hand corner that are eking out an existence. You see some of the traditional methods of agriculture in the lower left, and trying to bring in basic levels of education into these areas is oftentimes very difficult. Your instructor in the lower right. And of course, this tremendous biological diversity that is characteristic of this cloud forest and is in many cases under threat as a result of the demands for land as poor people try to find a way to make a living. This region has seen very high rates of deforestation, and we experience this firsthand. The fence in the foreground is for a national park, and you can see areas that have been cleared within the boundaries of the national park on very steep slopes for the purpose of planting, in this case, coffee. Again, you can see in green the surviving rainforest, in mustard color the extent of deforestation since 1940. There are a number of regional challenges being faced. Indigenous landowners are up against development driven by international investors and corporations. There are high degrees of government corruption, gang violence that in some cases has led to some of the highest murder rates in the world. And as an example, we see an indigenous Honduran human rights and environmental activist who was protesting, leading protests against a dam project funded by international investors, and she was murdered as a result of her activism. Mexico is Middle America's giant. It is a land that is rich in land and resources, a middle-income country, and a very large country at that. Obviously, a very long history with the United States, and the source of many immigrants, of course, with the ongoing debate about immigration into the United States, one that has been in the news very much lately, and a country, of course, that has also been devastated by the ongoing drug war. This shows the population of Mexico. You can see the red areas, the higher populated areas centered around Mexico City, and considerably less population in the north. This is very arid and mountainous in many cases, which limits the amount of population. Again, abundant resources. You see the various mining and minerals that are available, and you can see various oil and gas resources, infrastructure that's supporting the extraction of these resources. One of the defining characteristics of this country is the development of the maquiladoras, which were modern industrial plants constructed in the border region, specifically in the interest of serving the U.S. market. You can see 80% of all of the products are exported directly to the United States. These were constructed for the purpose of cheap labor and also less stringent environmental laws. So a variety of products, and when we hear about job losses in the United States, in many cases it is associated with the desire for cheap labor, which of course drove the cost of products down, so it was good for consumers, but in many cases led to job losses, especially in more rural communities that had high dependence on one or more manufacturing operations. One of the things that we've seen as a consequence is an increase in the per capita wealth of the states in the north of Mexico that border the United States. This has acted as a pull factor for migration within Mexico up into the border region, and of course some of those folks have also then migrated across the border. So this has had profound impact on the border region itself, and has also ended up leading to, in some cases, the development of economic activity in places like San Diego that facilitate the trade of these goods across the border. So again, distinct advantages that were resulted from the maquiladoras, but also some long-ranging effects, including air and water pollution. All of this falls under the umbrella of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which again has been much in the news of late, as we reevaluate our international agreements and our international interchange and exchange. The U.S. has a very long history of involvement in Middle America, a complicated one in many cases that was less than legal, and this has had a lasting effect throughout the region, including some of the unrest that we see today. We've seen some stability in places like Costa Rica, which in many cases is considered a model of conservation and sustainability, as a major destination for tourism, although we've also seen the designation of parks and preserves locking people out of economic activity in these areas, and in turn putting greater stress on some of the areas outside of these designated parks. By contrast, we could look at Middle America, which is an extremely poor country and one that has seen a history of problems, but especially in wake of the 2010 earthquake, continues to be a struggling and highly underdeveloped country. That's the end of my presentation.